lessons learned from one of the more tougher milsims here at the end of the year in Canada. And let's start right away with one of the more positive lessons I learned, and that was this Patagonia Merino wool base layer. As I mentioned already before, I was carrying around this big CP backpack, so I was sweating a lot, plus the swamp water got on top of my boots and my socks got wet, my legs were wet, so I was really drenched to the bone. And this is really not the situation where you want to be in the beginning of November in Ontario, Canada. But that is exactly the point where the merino wool advantage kicks in. Because unlike a lot of the Under Armour stuff which I've used before, merino wool actually stays warm or keeps you warm when you're getting wet. And this is exactly what you need, especially in cold weather situations. The Under Armour stuff is great when you want to stay cooler because you're very active. But when it's cold outside and the game or the activities you're doing are rather slow paced, then the merino wool is clearly the winner. Plus the one from Patagonia is a quite tight fit, and it has this very, very useful thumb lashes, as you see here, because they're actually making sure that they don't slip back if you wear any kind of layers on top of it, which surprisingly was more comfortable than I thought it would be. So the basic message is quite simple. If the weather's hot and or you're very active, then take an Under Armour one. But it's rather cold and slow paced, then ideally pick a base layer made out of merino wool. I know the Patagonia one is more on the expensive side, but trust me, it's worth the money. Plus it has a very, very high percentage of merino wool at around 80%. You will never get 100% merino wool stuff because it probably would fall apart. You need the polyester in there to keep it stable. But overall, this stuff was clearly the match winner for me personally. But if you have any other good experience with other merino wool base layers, which are hopefully a bit cheaper than the Patagonia one, please let us know in the comments below. Now let's talk about one of the bad lessons I learned. And this time it's about the wrong choice of mid layers. You know, if you're in the cold weather, it's all about layering correctly. And if you pick the wrong layers, you don't do yourselves a lot of favors. And that's exactly what I did this time. We just spoke about my fantastic base layer. And on my outer layer, it was an SOD gear BDU in Pancot Green Zone. And on top of that, I had a 3D ghillie suit. So all those outer layers are very robust, they're well IR treated, they fit the camo scheme right, but I needed something as an insulation in between. And for that matter, I decided to pick a soft shell from UF Pro. So the entire setup worked great in the wind and in the cold because it was really, really cold, about that cold when we started to leave. But then add the big bag, which I mentioned before, plus the fact that we were very, very active, like marching through the swamp, which is very exhausting, and I was close to a heat stroke. And yes, I should have known better. It's better to freeze a little bit or a lot rather when you're standing, but not sweating when you're moving, because sweating and then freezing your ass off later on can really, really kill you out there. Luckily, my base layer saved me from hypothermia, and after opening up all the venting options from my soft shell, it started to get a little bit better, plus resting of course. For taking off the mid layer wasn't a real time, because my teammate and I were the ones with the night vision and a thermal advantage, so obviously we had to take lead. Later on during guard duty, I was able to dry down, cool down, and it wasn't then as drastic as I thought it would become. So the lesson, once again, is quite simple. It's better to freeze a little bit when you're standing around before you get active, and when you feel warm and comfortable when you're standing, then take off a layer before you start marching out. Now finally, let's go back again to one of the better lessons I learned. And this time it is Crye Precision Nightcap. Traditionally, the problem with night vision is that you have to wear it with a helmet like this one up here. Now, the problem, however, is if you think about operations which are plus 48 hours, that means you either have to wear the helmet the entire time, or you have to put the helmet in your backpack or strap it on the outside, which takes away a lot of space. That is the moment where the nightcap comes in. You can compress it quite small, and it doesn't then take away a lot of space, and it's also quite light. Here you see how small the entire setup is. I mean, this is my PVS-14 in a protective case. And then in here, there's all the other small little stuff, like the nightcap, the mount, and my counterweight. And that essentially is all it. It works great with a mono setup like the PVS-14 I have here. It also works great with a lighter bino setup. Heavier bino setups on the other side are a little bit more uncomfortable over a longer time. The whole setup isn't as stable as a helmet setup because it's cloth based. So it swings a little bit up and down if you're moving, but still the weight and size advantage is, you can't argue really that away. So yes, the Nightcap is a clear alternative to helmets if size and weight is a concern, especially for those plus 24-hour operations.